Hello, hello. Welcome to my live today. And today we have a very special guest. Her name is Trisha Shetty. She has an organization called She Says India. She has spoken at UNESCO panels many, many times and is a very well spoken advocate for youth in general. And I'm very excited to have her on and to meet her for the first time. So I'm sending invites sent. Hi.
Hi. I'm hoping the connection isn't crappy. Can you confirm it's not crappy or if I have to?
No, I can see you and hear you perfectly fine.
Okay, perfect. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. It's so nice to finally meet you, or like not in person, but like virtually.
I think this qualifies these days as meeting someone. The most
How are you? How are you? How's your neck? Because you got into an accident recently.
uh, I'm okay. I'm okay. I think at this point I'm so tired of complaining that it's like when you're on the phone with someone, if it's a
Yeah.
donor and you just like you're like forcing yourself to smile and talk to them like that. That's how I feel about my neck. It's like I'm okay. Everything is okay.
Well, I personally hope you get better because I want you to continue the amazing work you're doing. Now, to start, I would like you to introduce yourself to everyone and talk about your organization, She Says India, and how that was born.
So we are an unapologetically feminist youth-led platform, and I'm a lawyer by profession, and it's a cause that women's issues was dominant everywhere, especially after the Nirbhaya incident, and for us, we just wanted to be more need-driven and not cause-driven. By that, it just meant we spent a lot of time just going to police stations. I personally, because I had no experience working in this space, so
Hmm.
to police stations, hospitals, and tell them, okay, I know what the law says, but if a survivor of sexual harassment walks in, what is the protocol you follow? And we
Hmm.
started filling in the lacuna of what's missing in the space and how
Hmm.
can. So we started working in the space of gender, and
Hmm.
once you start working in the space of gender, you realize it's all interconnected, right? You can't talk about the necessity for young girls to have guaranteed access to education without talking about sanitation and how they don't
Hmm.
have toilet infrastructure in school.
Hmm.
And the more I did this work, we started talking about criminalization of marital rape. And that's when we realized Nishiki actually from our team has joined in, and she's the first person from our team who started telling us about how we need to speak more about the fact that marital rape is not a crime in India. And that's when the overlay of how political everything is, especially when you're speaking about women's rights,
Hmm.
uh, so stark and evident because you had the then Minister of Women and Child Development say women do not understand the concept of consent. It is a Western notion. So we
Hmm.
cannot recognize marital rape. This is the
Hmm.
same Women and Child Development who, during the Katwa incident, they
Hmm.
didn't address anything but asking women to share their favorite hacks on how to clean kitchen sinks.
Yeah.
Uh, the Unnao incident. So we started from there about, again, reinforcing that we are an unapologetically feminist platform. So if you want to talk about women's issues, you have to get into the politics and governance of the country. You won't be able
Yes.
to. Otherwise.
So my question to you is, when we talk about women's issues, especially marital rape, it's a concept that I don't want to say vague. It's a concept that's non-existent in South Indian households because it's almost like what women are taught or what women believe is that once you are married, it's always consensual, right? And even in our generation, we have to educate our spouses and we have to educate our significant others that no, just because I am in a relationship with you does not mean that it's free reign when it comes to when we have intercourse. You
Mm-hmm.
know, um, obviously, like our conversations are more like, hey, there's a process, there's the whining and dining, there's the dating. But for more of a rural India, how do you explain marital consent to them? Because most people are not educated on this.
Here's the thing. It's not a rural India problem.
Okay.
Uh, I often hear this, right? Like, oh, if only your rural men were more educated, they would stop raping. But it's not. If you open any sort of papers, the only cases that you do see actually come to light are actually the people with the most least to lose. The poorest, the most marginalized, are the ones who actually do go and report it. When I
Uh-huh.
was heard of a case of a family abuse that got reported from the higher echelons of society, from the educated class.
Mm-hmm.
You heard of these cases. There's a UNFPA study that says 1 out of every 3rd man in India has admitted to having forceful sexual relations with his wife. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
when I speak about marital rape, I am very well aware that I'm speaking about men within my family structure, men within
Mm-hmm.
my space, when men within my social circles and beyond who are having sex with their partners without their consent. So, one, I need to recognize that I'm talking about perpetrators from within my own circle. And that's when
Mm-hmm.
I'm comfortable, right? In India, over 97% of cases of sexual abuse are by someone known to the survivor intimately.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
what the law says is if your rapist is your boyfriend, you can file a case. If your rapist is your ex-husband, you can file a case. If your rapist is a stranger in a dark alley, you can file a case. But if your rapist is your husband, you have no legal recourse. There was a case that had actually come to light of a couple. This is before Section 357 that criminalized, sex that does not lead to procreation, which was attacking the LGBTQI community, the queer community, essentially. Um,
Mm-hmm.
down, there was a case that came to court where a woman wanted to seek recourse to justice because her husband was brutally sexually abusing her. He
Mm-hmm.
was raping her, sodomizing her. Um, and she knew she couldn't file a rape case because the text is very clear. It says under section 356 of rape, which is the IPC, she knew she couldn't file a rape case. So she decided, okay, let me file it under section 357, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, section 377. I apologize. Section 377. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the defense of the husband actually said, look, even if he did sodomize her, Section 356, which covers rape under the IPC, is a newer law because it came after the Criminal Law Amendment Act of 2013. And that
Mm-hmm.
text says the exception is no man can be charged with sexually assaulting his wife unless his wife is less than 15 years of age, which has now been increased to 18 to recognize child marriage. So they actually said the text says no man can be charged with sexually assaulting his wife. Ergo, even if he did sodomize her, he actually is protected under the exemption of the rape law, and therefore
Mm-hmm.
he is arrested. So, one, this is not a rural problem, and I guess this is why people don't want to criminalize it because they
Mm-hmm.
know such a pervasive problem that it's going to, it's easier to talk about the rapist in a dark alley, uh,
Mm-hmm.
but kind of take a woman's agency away. And the common argument you will hear is, oh, what do you mean? How can a man rape his wife? If she doesn't have sex with him, who else will have sex with him? Or
Yeah.
how will you put a camera in my bedroom? How will I prove it was consensual? Should I sign a consent form every time I have sex with my wife? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think our politicians do us any favors by espousing the kind of problematic notions that they do with regards to the issue of marital rape and not criminalizing it.
Do you think that the law is one aspect of it, but like educating our women, our moms, our aunts, our sisters, our friends, that's another issue because a lot of family dynamics is or a part of family dynamics, it is taught to please your spouse, to please your husband. It is never taught like what pleases you, you know, this concept of like a healthy relationship or what is needed to kind of be emotionally healthy is not talked about. So, I mean, have you had struggles in getting women to understand what consent is and that they have a right to consent?
The first time actually I came on national TV was on Arnab's show. This was back in the day when he was the anchor at Times,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it was on this topic, on the criminalization of marital rape. And all I said at that point, I was still a lot more like docile and calm than I than I can get now. When
Hmm.
I said, marriage is not a license for sex. Consent must always be accounted for. That's it.
Yep.
And it was viral. It went, with hate. Over 99% of the cases of the feedback was just hate. Like, who would even want to fuck you, XYZ, bringing it down to my looks, a frustrated feminist. That's a good one that never goes out of style. Uh,
Frustrated feminist.
yeah. And then the abuses and the harassment. Surprisingly, at that point, I got a message from a survivor who reached out to me saying that it took her to listen to me to say that
Hmm.
marital rape is a crime, to understand, because every time she told her mother
Hmm.
abusing me, her mother
Hmm.
told her, adjust. We've all heard this, adjust kar lo, adjust,
Yeah.
uh, adjust. And eventually one day she told her, I cannot adjust anymore. I cannot
Hmm.
adjust. Mom tells her, uh, you think every time your Babaji is having sex with me, it's consensual. I just don't call it what you're calling it. So by the time she reached out to us, it was not to ask for help. She literally, her words were, I feel weak because I cannot adjust to the abuse that my body is going through, like other people seem to be able to. And I needed to hear from you to say that, okay, it is a crime what's going on through my body.
Hmm.
So it's a struggle. To answer your question, it's a struggle
It's a
because
struggle. Yeah.
I'm talking
Um,
about within family networks, and that's never easy.
it's also important to note that marital rape is not always violent. Anytime you say no and you feel pressurized by your husband or significant other to partake in the act, um, that is also marital rape. Like we have this notion that rape is violent and you're getting beaten. It's when you're within the act, when you're taking part in the act, but you don't want to. You don't want to be there. It is happening without your will and you feel silenced that you
It's
cannot say no.
You are 100% right. It's this obsession of wanting the perfect victim. What did you do just before? What were you wearing right before? Show me your bruises,
Mm,
show me your marks. The amount of times they'll be like, Are, rape to nahi hua. Or at least gang rape to nahi hua. Oh, you did, your intestines are intact. Don't worry about it. It's this a perverse way of looking at someone. And just this topic, I'm actually reading Positive Vibes says they rape our bank accounts. Well, the truth is, if the best you can offer is your money, then there's clearly something wrong, not just, with you as
yeah.
a person, your genitalia and your self-confidence. So it's just an issue. If you read the comments too, that seems to piss off um
No,
apologists for.
these kind of comments piss off weak men. A
Oh, of course.
strong man has no problem sleeping on the couch when he's fought with his wife or girlfriend. All right? A strong man will be like, okay, you don't like me right now. It's only going to last for a day or two. I'll go sleep on the couch. A strong man, after he tries to initiate, realizes you don't want it, rolls over and goes to sleep. Is very fine and okay with like not partaking in the act. Like when I see comments like that, it's like this is a weak man, beta male.
Also, I mean, keeping away from the concept of weak and strong, it's also what makes you think that sex could be transactional?
Yes,
A place for that. It's a respectable profession. Prostitution is a very respectable profession. Go seek their services where
yes.
consent is for. But anyways,
Yeah, so we digress. Um, I'm so glad you brought this topic up. So when I started this, I wasn't planning for this conversation, but I think it is such an important conversation to have. And it is a conversation that like it's shied away from. Like, I actually did not did not I didn't I was never exposed to this until like, I started kind of living with my significant other, or you know or being with him for longer periods of time, that not all you don't want to partake in
mm,
the activity um all the time. I'm just throwing some vulgarness people out of the live as I see them. So that was how I was exposed to the topic. And we did have conversations about this, and I really do feel that these conversations need to be generalized and the stigma needs to come down. And I am a proponent. I've said this numerous times that sex needs to be talked about in Indian households.
Oh, of course.
Um, Sex needs to be discussed with your sons and daughters, not once, but constantly, because it'll take away the stigma.
Oh, but for sure. But honestly, this is where educational systems need to do better, right?
Hmm.
Because we know that those our parents have not been taught on how to have those conversations. So truthfully, they lack the vocabulary on how to communicate, and this is
Yeah.
where systems can do such a brilliant job of actually talking about these issues. And yet we have this sort of aversion to talk about
Mm.
sex ed, consent, the laws that you can have access to, which is what we do through She Says. We go to schools and colleges and talk to them about consent. What are the laws you have access to? And try to have these conversations. And because I would not trust our parents to have this conversation, honestly. I think that generation needs to do a lot of unlearning.
Yes.
They don't, including my generation, but that generation more so.
Yeah. I'm glad. So She Says India is an organization in which you help rape victims, but it sounds like you also help give women a voice. And
Arundhati Roy said it, beautifully, and I'm going to paraphrase her about, there's no people as the voiceless. It's only the actively silenced and the deliberately ignored. And I'm telling you, it's people speak. A survivor in general will speak. It's only after systems of support have let you down that you get disappointed and re-victimized. So no, we don't give anyone a voice. Far be it for us to think we have the authority to. We are just here to provide on-ground support for survivors. So everything from coming with you to the police station, coming with you to the courtrooms, coming with you to the hospitals, making sure you have access to the law. There's
mhm,
an amazing day celebrated in America called Juneteenth. Uh,
mhm,
it's June of 13th, which is the day the news spread to the last part of, I think, Texas, that slavery had been abolished. And
mhm.
they didn't know. So the reason the day is celebrated is so that you have access to the law now, not just the history on the significance of a law being passed. So for us, it's that how do we make sure people can have access, and because of a lot of the work that we do on ground, we then know what we can advocate for. So we successfully lobbied to have the Indian government drop the tax on menstrual hygiene products. Um, we push for policies and gender sensitive policies, and work with institutions, because I am an institutionalist. And in today's day and age, living in a democracy, I think the need to protect institutions is so important, especially with this horrible regime that we have been stuck with. um,
Mhm.
so that's what we do as an organization, where
Mhm.
we will try to advocate for gender issues as best we can.
So one last question on this topic, and you said unapologetically feminist, right? So, um, hold, oh, my aunt's in here and she's cussing at some people. So, my question is that you said unapologetically feminist, and I have noticed that sometimes when you are a strong female with a voice, um, people, mostly Indian people or mostly Indian males, tend to get very flustered or don't know how to handle a strong woman. Have you ever come across incidents like that where people just don't think you should be talking?
Oh, of course. I mean, I think the radical act of us breathing and exercising agency in itself, like, upsets people, because the truth is, we are not meant to be here occupying these spaces. We are not meant to be occupying digital spaces, offline spaces. The video that we got connected through, which was talking about reservation, and the need for reservation, is I was talking about the same thing, that they do not like the idea. And when I say they, I wouldn't just restrict it to men. I think people closest to status quo and power. It's
Hmm.
idea that, women are exercising their own agency, can speak for themselves, are speaking for themselves, know what they want, are advocating for it, upsets them. They
Mm-hmm.
speak up for your rights, but do so politely,
Mm-hmm.
without the oppressor too much. And
Mm-hmm.
respectability game, it's put on us. As
Mm-hmm.
we speak up, we must do so without upsetting the oppressors too much. Speak in a volume that is not too high. I've had people
Mm-hmm.
whose voices that go too high are upsetting to them. I had my psychologist explain to me as to how a woman's voice inherently is not as soothing as a man's voice is to the ear. So, uh, what can you do? Your presence will upset them anyway, so might as well double down.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Okay, so I found you, met you, discovered you while you were speaking, or a video of you speaking at UNESCO at a panel you partook in UNESCO. We'll get into your interactions at UNESCO, but I what I want to talk about is you made a statement there about majority of rooms or decision-making spaces are occupied by older men,
Mm-hmm.
and that there needs to be more space made for women and youth. So expand on that a little bit.
You every time you ask for quotas, which there is enough studies that talks about why quota system works, right? If you look at countries that have adopted the quota system in governance, if you look at our local panchayats, which have more dominance of women leadership, quota system works. And yet they will keep coming back to, but what about meritocracy? Right? This is an argument that also is thrown frequently in the direction of DBA, anti-caste activists, when they double down on the need for reservation and quota as to what about meritocracy. Um, but if you look at the leadership spaces that
Mm-hmm.
are currently held, they're mostly old white men. They are straight. They have a gender. These positions of power do have a gender, do have a race, do have a class, do have a sexual orientation, and also are the ones that have got us to this crisis of complete failed leadership, the climate crisis. So you cannot tell me, you cannot talk to me about meritocracy and tell me that a woman should prove why she deserves to have a seat at the table when these seats are occupied. Message. You soon realize you've become one of the very people you were advocating against, and it's a slow, insidious process. I have found myself doing that. Do you find yourself doing that actually?
I there was a point in time where, well, I'll talk about the farmers protest. Like when it was in Punjab, like I was like, okay, it's being taken care of. I don't have to say anything, like protect my platform, I don't want to lose followers, this and that, protect my platform. I might want to go back into films, this and that. And what ended up happening was that I started off slow when the farmers were moving from Punjab to Haryana. I saw the violence, and then, I saw my grandmother's reaction, and I was like, okay, like, I cannot be silent on this. Like, this is too vital of an issue, I need to speak on it. And then I did. And then as the situation kept escalating, like it came to a point where I had to make a decision that, whatever goes, goes.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had to say, like, okay, this is more important than this, and this. Now at this point, whatever I lose because of it, so be it.
Mm-hmm.
And I made that decision knowingly. But by making this decision, I was allowed into spaces and rooms of influence and decision making, possibility. I was able to network and meet with the advocacy work I was doing. Then what happened is, like, now that I'm continuing it, and I feel like I'm being borderline annoying to the people whose doors I keep knocking on. So like, yeah, that happens, but it's just like I'm not I'm not an activist. This was my first kind of um like this is the first time like I've stepped into this kind of area. I'm new to it. I think maybe in a couple of years, as I make progress with what I'm doing, and if it continues, we will see. But for me, it was like, okay, if I'm going to if I'm going to fight for this, it's going to be all or nothing. Like you can't half-ass things in my
Mhm.
book. So
But also, I mean, with this particular administration that we
yes.
have, if you stay silent, you have very well taken a part too. You made a political decision. There's this influencer, I forget his name, Beer Bicep something, who put out this ridiculous uh, post touting how he's apolitical, and how he helps solve problems by working on solutions and not complaining. And that kind of argument really irks me, because like, you are a tax-paying citizen. The home minister is responsible for safety and security. My
Yep.
job at an organization called She Says, of occupying civil society space, is to not
Mhm.
be so good that I make government redundant. That's the Gates Foundation model that I so vehemently disagree with, of being so good that you need to replace state apparatus for ultimate control of governance. We're not supposed to be doing that as civil society. Um, so to everyone who keeps quiet or slides into DMs, I'm sure you have that, right? Like all your friends sliding into your DMs and
Yeah.
oh, I completely agree with you, but I can't speak about it publicly. You're so brave. I could never do that. I'm sure you have that.
I do. My response to them is simple, that silence is a privilege.
Mhm.
Silence is a privilege. So you are silent because this issue is not affecting you. You are a privileged individual and you are refusing to speak up for the less privileged.
And a choice.
Um,
Choice.
huh?
And a choice. You're being very intentional with your silence. I remember being during the anti-CAA protest just before COVID hit us. When I would go to Mumbai Bagh, one of the bags set up in Bombay for the protest, I remember a Muslim driver who was driving me telling me as to how pissed off he was by the Khans, and saying we have literally built their career, the across the world. Anywhere you go with a high Muslim population, everyone knows Shah Rukh Khan. They have literally built their careers, that segment of society, and the least they can do is speak up when they do, in in their close knit groups. But you can't do it publicly. It is a choice. Come on, it is a choice of cowardice. So yeah, I'm grateful for voices like yours that have actually spoken up against this and continue to do so.
Thank you so much. And I am about to throw another person.
Do you see the comments? Because at this point, my comment thing is just like frozen. I can't see anything. So,
So I've like minimized them so I can only see two comments at a time, but every time something pops up, which is like weird, I like throw them out. Okay, so not speaking up is also taking a stance. When you don't speak up, you're taking the side of the oppressor. That needs to be said loud and clear. So,
and
I
who are
mean,
I'm just going to double down on this a little bit. When Disha Ravi, the climate activist, the founder of Fridays for Future movement in India,
mhm,
was unlawfully arrested. I mean, I call it unlawfully arrested because there were
mhm.
so many legal procedures that were flouted when they picked her up. But when was arrested, let's call her when was arrested, who are the people who actually doubled down in solidarity? It was climate activists around the world. Lichi Priya, this 9-year-old climate activist from Mizoram, Vanessa, a climate activist, Alexandria, a climate activist from the US, climate activists globally double down in solidarity, demanding that they release Disha, right? And of course, the usual voices within the left-leaning space were there criticizing this. But you will still see a deficit in uh, having a spine almost
Yeah.
by everyone calling out and administration saying this is wrong. And when I say deficit in ambition and deficit in strength, I'm also looking at the UN institutions who have no problem calling these young people to make look good at events about climate, right? They'll give them the awards, they'll give them the panels, they'll call them to their platforms to make them look good. Because let's be clear, the only reason you're calling people like that is to make you look good and not look like an outdated edifice of a monument that you are. but you still cannot put out one statement in solidarity. And when you question them, they'll say, oh, but we cannot. Member states control our finances. Look, I know how the UN works really well. And
Yeah.
I can tell you this complete deficit of ambition and a spine and what is diplomacy. And they very routinely will do this, saying, oh, you don't understand diplomacy. We would rather have them at the table to talk about these issues than alienate these world leaders whilst
Yeah.
people die and young people lead the way. So I think at this point,
I mean,
sorry.
if so my interaction or exposure to how the United Nations works has been through this farmers protest because, like I said, I went and knocked on any door I possibly could. And 90% of the responses I got were just that. Exactly like that. That we can't say this. We have to say it like this, and it needs to be
in a way where they will think you're stupid. Where they'll be like, oh, you don't know better. Let me tell you how this works. No. There is no justification. There is no let me tell you how this works. And yet, somehow, these institutions will, or these powerful people found their voice to criticize Donald Trump, right? From institutions, but they will not say anything about violence against our people. And for me, the answer is very clear, because you're racist. You don't care about the sacrifices that brown people are making. But yet, if anything, Notre Dame burns and they all want to cry a river about how Notre Dame is burning, but they will not talk about our farmers sitting on the largest protest, the largest human protest in history happening, but they will want to cry a river about Notre Dame burning, So it's this whole idea that, oh, you don't understand why we don't speak up because, you don't understand how diplomacy works. Like, but not think of any other,
How did you get involved with UNESCO?
No, I wasn't involved with UNESCO. I was selected as a young leader for the Sustainable Development Goals a few years ago. And since then, I've been an advocate for the Sustainable Development Goals. And I currently work with the Paris Peace Forum. I'm the president of the steering committee, and I consult the UN on the SDGs. And I work with a few of the UN affiliated entities as on their board, or I'm sitting on their advisory board, and I've worked with them for a while. So these are the people that I have been working with for a very long time, either as a visiting speaker or someone who goes for their workshops or consults them on how to engage more young people for the Sustainable Development Goals.
That's really cool. So I work with an NGO that now has consultancy status with UNESCO. So that's how I'm affiliated, interact, or that's how my interactions with them, it's been through that. Moving forward to the farmers protest. You spoke about it at a UNESCO panel. So props to you, because you brought it into the rooms that, I couldn't bring it into. And so let's talk about that, because you don't shy away about talking about taboo subjects, no matter what the platform is. So let's talk about the farmers protest and how you've been advocating for it.
With this administration, the second they start calling someone a terrorist or anti-national, to me, in my eyes, they are the true patriots leading us into the right. So this administration is so obsessed with crushing dissent and pushing itself as these strong men who never give in, strong men. Anyone who's ever worked with this administration or is aware about how politics work knows that the decision-making authority is limited to the PM, the HM, and their RSS wing. Everyone knows this, right? So even during I'm going to go back to the Katwa Unnao incident, when there was widespread condemnation. Now the accused, who's actually been convicted, Kuldeep Singh, at that point said, "Nichle istar ke log, I would not commit such a crime against nichle istar ke log," which is a casteist comment. And how would I do this to someone from a low caste community, right? It was horrible. There were two parallel incidences, absolute grotesque crimes against humanity happening, the Katwa and the Unnao incident. And yet, again, I go back to silence, complete silence, all the major leaders of the administration, right? And at that point, again, it was the Minister of Women and Child Development who was asking women to share their hacks on how to clean kitchen sinks. So we know how this administration works. They do not like any and all form of dissent, from attacking educational institutes to passing out now a new norm, a new notice which basically says that educational institutes cannot have any sort of online events either, which talk about Indian affairs without first getting vetted, the topic getting vetted, and each and every participant getting vetted by the Ministry of External Affairs, right, during a pandemic, because of the farmers' protest. The thing with the farmers' protest, truthfully, when the toolkit came out, they were pissed because this is their playbook. They have a playbook of toolkit. They have been doing this propaganda for so long that they couldn't understand how the people fighting for their human rights have figured out how to use social media and advocate for their issues and mobilize people at large. Literally.
I mean, you're so right. You are so right, because this was like, so I know the gentleman or the organization who made it, like very, very fond of him and his organization. And like I don't think they thought that it was going to get as big as it did. First off, it was just like something that they were circulating within their circle. Two, it was 100% just out of their playbook, like the Indian government's playbook. And the only thing it was, and I just want to clarify, it was a Google document in which it was teaching people where to get resources, how to tweet, and which hashtag to use.
Mm-hmm. Look, the idea of people mobilizing and strategizing and using online spaces really upsets. I don't know the person who started the document. I was not aware about the person till it was all over the news and everyone was talking about the incident. But what I do know is this government's history of crushing any and all dissent. What I do know is the media houses that are their lapdogs, for the lack of a better word. I know them really well. I've been in rooms with them. I've been interviewed by them. I know their playbook. I know how they orchestrate conversations. I know how they are once the cameras go on, once the cameras go off. I've spent enough time with Arnab and all these other people to know exactly how they function, what they think, right? And for me, again, I go back to, you want to crush dissent with such brute force to send other people a message, to stay in line, to shut up, to keep your head down, and just keep suffering one injustice after the other. You want to pick on the most vulnerable and the most marginalized. You arrest Nodi. You inflict sexual abuse onto her with zero accountability. Why? Because she fought for labor rights, much like, Sudha Bharadwaj, who's been fighting for Adivasis and their rights for such a long time. Father Stanley. If you see what this government is doing, the case, the Bhima Koregaon case that happened.
I'm not aware of that.
So there was a Bhima Koregaon case that happened that has in essence targeted. There was violence that broke out, and they in essence targeted certain activists, linking them to the Bhima Koregaon violence that happened, even though these activists were never present, never made any calls for violence. Obviously, there was no connection. Then there was a letter that started floating saying there's a conspiracy to, assassinate our prime minister. There's been no origin of this letter, where this came from, and they linked these all together to then, target Father Stanley, Dr. Sudha Bharadwaj, and few other activists. And the evidence provided in court was Karl Marx's book in his library, in one of their libraries, saying, look, he reads Karl Marx. Of course, he's an anti-national. And the judge actually accepted this, questioning a veteran, learned, academic activist as to why are you reading Karl Marx? One of the computers, actually, they identified that the original document that was leaked, they did not even use that the document had been hacked. The activist's computer had been hacked, and they seeded this document. And the way they found this out is because they used a newer version of Microsoft to put the document inside, but the person's computer was an older computer that could not have that specific font that was used to make that paperwork. So, and just yesterday, Father Stanley, who's been convicted in the Bhima Koregaon case, he's 84 years old. He can barely see, he cannot hear. They're asking for him to be let go. And they're refusing to. There's no evidence that has been produced against him in court. So coming back to the farmers' protest, why did I speak up? Because I know this government. I know that
Yeah.
they not like dissent. They will crush it down. And in this case, whose side do you want to be on? Do you want to be on a side of a government that has a history and record of getting away with crimes against our most vulnerable, the Dalit community, Muslims, against the most marginalized? Or are you going to be on the side of farmers who have let go of everything and are at these protest sites protesting? During the anti-CAA movement, I was at the protest. It's not convenient to leave everything and sit on ground day in and day out protesting, asking to be seen, to be visible. It's the most patriotic act you can do, and it is not convenient. Whoever thinks it's convenient, go and do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. How was your
I
like trying to work with international organizations and talk about the farmers' issue?
it was difficult, extremely difficult. That's why I had to join forces with an NGO who could kind of help me maneuver it because I wasn't getting anywhere. Except for the one person who I honestly had like a very just smooth time getting in touch with was my federal congressman, Congressman McGovern. He really was like his people were like, "You know what? Like he's busy right now. We can have a meeting with you on this date." They had the meeting. They asked me like in order their exact words, in order for you to feel heard, what would you like us to do? And he did it. I said, could you please tweet about it and tweet it from the Tom Lantos Rights Commission, which is the Congress Commission? And he was like, absolutely. And they tweeted. I mean, the BJP IT cell went wild. Like when I say they went wild, I kid you not, it was tens of thousands of hate comments on both the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission Twitter page and his Twitter page. But the point being was that besides my congressman, who's, my vote directly affects, everyone else has been like, there's 9 congressmen in Massachusetts. I haven't been able to get any other one of them to tweet, to speak, or even to get a meeting with them. And it's me, my sister, one of my puppies, and 2 other people, and we call them daily. We've been doing this since December, and we haven't been able to get a meeting. So that's how it is. But it's a long game, and we're going to have to keep going and slowly and surely. But to follow up on your comments about dissent, Thomas Jefferson once said that dissent is the greatest form of patriotism. People do not dissent unless they want to help their nation grow. When dissent is curbed, growth is curbed. How do you grow? How do you improve if you don't have any type of criticism? If nobody points out that they're unhappy or they don't like the way something is going, dissent is needed. And dissent is a hallmark of a democracy. Without dissent, you cannot have a democracy.
Oh, of course. Our Supreme Court actually said dissent is the safety valve of democracy. I just wish they would actually implement their statements than what we have witnessed them do. But again, if you are arresting a pregnant anti-CAA feminist activist, if you are arresting a Pinjra Tod activist, who couldn't even be with her father during his last days, if you are going out of your way to arrest a 21-year-old climate activist, if you are going out of your way to arrest, Umar Khalid, who has never, ever said anything unpatriotic, at least that I have witnessed of, since in public life, to me, that says everything that I need to know about an administration and who this administration actually listens to. Of course, you're listening to your Ambani and your Adani. And I mean, Adani and his abhorrent crimes against the environment are well documented. Australians are leading an amazing movement to stop Adani and his coal mines. If that's who you're listening to, then I feel extremely legitimate in doubling down in solidarity with our farmers, because again, at this point, such a large movement that's led by a very strong diaspora. The great thing about this movement is the Punjabi actors, the musicians, the athletes who came forward publicly and supported their community. That truthfully, I've been doing this work for a while, and I can tell you how heartening it was for all other communities to actually see that happen and realize that their lives have value
Yeah.
associated to it. And it's so heartening to when celebrities like that put money behind the cause, stand up, speak up, call out trolls like Kangana Ranaut for what they are, and publicly support movements. It does such a great job, and that's why the farmers' protest is so important for the democracy of India. It is so important. People don't realize that if this protest does not succeed, it is going to be a litmus test for how we proceed moving forward, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Regardless of what issue you care about. I mean, it's hard to not care about food rights and security, but even if that's not an issue you care about, if you care about your democracy as you know it to be, you have to be invested in this struggle.
100%. Hold on one second. Throwing out another person.
All right. I still am stuck on the guy who said the.
Maybe it's a connection issue. I'm seeing you perfectly fine. You haven't frozen at all. Um, yeah. The farmers protest. Oh, speaking of which, the farmers protest, guys. To the people that are watching, single border water has kind of gathered there, and it looks like a tappad. So if you guys can get there to help out, please help. Electricity has been cut from Tikri border. So please, please, please make noise about that, because usually when they cut electricity, they're planning on doing something abhorrent. Um, so please focus on that. Okay. All right, Trisha, I'm gonna look to see if we have any interesting questions. So give me one
I
second.
think
I'm gonna there's a question and answer thingy here. So um uh so Shreya _mg asked, what to do if talking about politics is taking a toll on mental well-being?
I'm curious to know your answer too, but honestly, I have a therapist on call. I've had a therapist on call for a very, very long time. So I have like a playbook of this therapy, routine therapy, cold showers to help with anxiety and just feeling really bad in your body. Cold showers is really helpful. Uh, they have gifted us the night. I'm sorry, they have gifted us darkness, but then we have the night to celebrate, to make friends, to dance, to listen to music. So be very intentional about making sure you live your life too while fighting the fight. Like go out, meet your friends, dance, to music, be intentional about loving people, because you cannot do this work without doubling down on love. Truthfully, I have never experienced more love and solidarity than I have when I've actually been on ground with people protesting. So you can't, all of this is mental warfare and a mental game, so therapy, having a solid support group of people that will support you publicly and not just slide in your DMs,
Yeah.
are going to root for you, cheer you on publicly. Amplifying that goes a long way, because why should you only keep amplifying the hate you're getting? Amplify the love, and cold showers, dancing,
A glass of wine here and there.
oh, of course,
Um,
yeah.
it's very important to realize that you might be just one person, and you will not see, you in your head might not think that you have any power, but understand that bees dictate, like there's research that one bee kind of can dictate how the wind goes, or the flutter of a butterfly dictates, the winds and the storms and stuff. So I'm not thinking of the analogies correctly, or how bees, their pollination dictates how fast the seasons change. So like understand that you might be one person, but your voice is powerful. You're one person. You will not see the impact you have today. You might not even see it in your lifetime, but you have an impact. You are powerful. You matter. Your voice matters. Use it.
And another thing that's so important, but another thing is, you don't do this fight to win or to have any sort of guaranteed end results. You show up because you know that it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps forward, 5 steps back. You show up because you must. So if you're showing up thinking, oh, but I did everything right, I should get the guaranteed end result. No, it's not going to happen. So you show up because you absolutely, absolutely must. And truthfully, I don't understand people who don't show up. Like, if you see a building burning in front of you and people are screaming, and you choose to walk away and continue sipping on your chai, like, do you go to bed that night saying, oh, there was a building burning, and I am so amazing because I just looked away and continued drinking my chai, and like pat yourself on your back? Like, I don't get it. So you don't show up for anyone else but because you absolutely must. We're in a democracy. Like, don't let these people fool you into thinking that we don't have a role to play in this democracy apart from showing up to vote.
Yeah, 100%.
Do you find
Dissent.
get attacked because you are not physically located in India and you're speaking on this issue?
Yes. So actually, no. When people were attacking me because they stopped, every time somebody comments, I either would block them or like people would attack them back. So I tend not to get hit by BJP IT strolls, um, unless it's on this. These are all BJP IT cell people. And their basic thing was read the laws.
Mm-hmm.
And my response to that was always, if you think that these bills are difficult to read or understand, please read a piece of American legislation. Or now that like I'm actively involved in things relating to the UN, one of these UN like draft
Mm-hmm.
agreements or whatever, like they're so wordy and complicated, and like literally these laws sound like they were written by a high schooler. That's the level of vocabulary used. It is not difficult to understand.
Go down this path. It's something that they said during the anti-CA movement, right? Like, read, you haven't read. One, the notion is that these poor farmers, these poor women don't know better. They are getting misguided by people with vested interests who want them to protest for no reason. And two, you're literally questioning someone's intelligence who is responsible for the food on your plate, that they don't know better.
Yeah.
And yet you will not question your own intelligence that our prime minister has not given one single press conference
Mm-hmm.
and does not show his educational qualifications, right?
Mm-hmm.
The people obsessing over read the law. No, you actually read our prime minister and heads of states educational qualifications and then come back to us about how educated and uneducated we sound with our political dissent. It's yeah.
Let's talk about that, because let's talk about Kangana first off, because she really aggravates me first off, and her being off of Twitter is great, but like, what do you think she has some sort of a mental issue, or do you think she knows what she's doing is messed up?
I mean, I suffer from depression and anxiety. So for a lot of people, that would qualify as, a mental health issue. So I don't see
Yeah.
mental
No,
health as
not
a.
that. I don't want to say no. I'm talking about, does she actually have a mental health issue? Because some of the stuff she says is so bogus that like it would have to be a mental health issue in order to justify it, because there's no how do you justify someone who's saying Bengal is burning after election, who's making all knowingly, there are things that she knowingly does that in no way, shape, or form can she think is accurate. She says it. She actively called for genocide. People like that are put away. People who come out and say, "Hey, I want to murder a group of people," they're put in institutions. That's a mental health issue. Like, I'm fully seriously asking, like, is
Again,
she?
I think, I mean, on her best days, she's a bootlicker of fascism. So I would not attribute it at all or make an assessment on her mental health. I've met the most amazing people with, mental health issues that do not get off by suppressing other people's human rights or calling for violence. It does not take a genius to figure out what her strategy is. She is an apologist for this government, right? She is another variant of your Vivek Agnihotri. I think his name is the director or something, the Buddha guy director. I forget his name. She's that Ashok guy, all of them, they're apologists for this government. It's not even like they will keep quiet and be complicit with their silence. They are going out of their way to propagate this sort of hyper nationalistic rhetoric. I mean, what she's saying about Israel and Palestine, she clearly has no idea what she's saying. She's like, yay, Netanyahu. I mean, someone who is celebrating an apartheid state, someone who's celebrating a leadership that has gone out of its way to kill young people, to kill children. To me, it's and she is the strongest advocate for this administration. Like, she and that crook of a Baba Ramdev who's selling his snake products, and this Pragya Thakur who keeps obsessing about cow urine. Like, this, I mean, this is their, their Avenger squad, if you may. One is obsessed with cow piss, another is obsessed with cow dung. It's no wonder where we are at as a people. So I don't know what's up with her mental health, and I wouldn't make any assertions on the same. But I do know that she is an apologist for fascism, and
it's getting to the point where, like, because she's been taken off of Twitter after she recently called for basically genocide in Bengal, or threw Modi under the bus or whatever. But the point is, like, she doesn't get it, that it's not okay. Like, she doesn't, I don't know. Like, it's very difficult for me to understand how she thinks that she's an intellectual, because she really portrays, or not just her, most of the people in a fascist kind of network try to portray themselves as extreme intellectuals. And we see this with Modi as well, when in reality, you can tell that it's more coming.
Poo-pooing, you don't. I mean, the book that Penguin has published again of this of Modi, where he's talking about, you don't need to aspire to be a cricketer, no, not cricketer, sorry, a doctor or a lawyer or a engineer. Modi, if anything, is a textbook case for poo-pooing on, the elite, the educated, the liberals, the, what is it, that word that they use, the Khan market gang and everything. They have glamorized being ignorant buffoons. They have glamorized that notion.
That's my point.
Down on academia and this concept of activists and academics coming forward with research and educational material. I mean, that snake oil product that he's selling, Coronel or whatever, had, I think, less than 100 people in their case study. And they're touting it as some cure for COVID that our health minister, union health minister, has supported. So they have conflicted crimes against humanity. And each and every person who has died because of COVID or has lost someone who's because of COVID can directly hold these people accountable. From your Kangana Ranawat to your, even worse, even more egregious, our union ministers and elected leaders who are actually supposed to keep us safe from this pandemic. So I don't think it's a mental health issue as much as it's a moral compass issue.
Yes, that's the right word to use, moral compass issue. Now, let's talk about ignorance and education a little bit, because the easiest way to control people is to keep them ignorant, right? They say, even with Trump, majority of his kind of support, or his base, was a portion of America that had barely graduated high school. We've crossed an hour, so I'll keep this short. But, like, the idea that an uneducated kind of people kind of feed into fascism.
Look at the current leadership that we have. You have our union minister for health touting, and I again go back to this, saying that we should study the effects, oh, sorry, the ministry funding an Ayush ministry study about how if chanting the Bhagavad Gita can cure COVID.
If what?
Chanting
The
Bhagavad
Bhagavad Gita.
Gita
Okay.
can be a cure for COVID. They're funding this study, okay, with our taxpayer money. That you have an elected representative from Bhopal, Pragya Thakur, who first spoke and said her cancer got magically cured because she drank cow piss.
Oh my
Then
God.
drinking cow piss every day, and that's making her stay away. That's curing her from COVID. Then she talks about how you should pat a cow's back if you don't want diseases. These are the people our leadership is extolling, right? And then they also lead gatherings saying, Desh ke gaddaron ko goli maro salo ko. Now you tell me, who is the real gaddar here? When during a pandemic, we have this kind of leadership where so many of our people are dying, they cannot breathe. The kind of politics that we have witnessed when it comes to vaccine distribution, when it comes to medicine distribution, when it comes to oxygen supply, right? Where countries' source of oxygen, the countries that have donated oxygen, is getting stuck in warehouses. France
Yes.
actually made sure they earmarked each hospital that their oxygens would go to and made sure it was delivered. That's why France's oxygen was actually delivered to, I think, 6 Delhi hospitals and 2 out of Delhi hospitals in the first consignment of aid that came, right?
Uh-huh.
This is the leadership we have ruling us at this point. Of course, they are a consortium of people who don't value education, who don't value science, who don't value research-backed anything, and critically, who don't value Indian lives. They don't. So they make the case for themselves. They make us look bad internationally when you keep saying this rubbish. You pour water over globe and says this is going to cure global warming. Like, who are these leaders that we have been blessed with? It's not of our people for sure. It's
That's that that's so hilarious. Pour water over the globe and it's gonna cure. Some of the things that happen, like it makes me sad and laugh at the same time. Anyways, so we've crossed an hour. So any closing remarks, Trisha?
um, I guess I would just ask you for for whoever's watching this, and I want to know this is what would be what keeps you going with regards to the farmers' protest, to continue to be active, vocal, and what is the learning that you have got from this work of mobilizing and trying to advocate for an issue that you think people would be more than willing to support, given
So
it's a
you want to know from me what makes me keep going? For me, this is very personal. So I was born in the US. I grew up in a village near Bharatpur, Rajasthan, where we had approximately a little bit over 60 acres, and we had obviously workers there, but I also witnessed my grandma and grandpa um, toiling the field, and I vividly remember myself and the fun I used to have there. Um, then the fact that when we moved here, we have vegetables growing in my backyard. We have vegetables growing at my chachaji's backyard. We have vegetables growing in my pua's backyard. I have two puas. And farming, even after moving here, just never kind of left us. When my dad first came to the US, he came in California, and there he used to work at his uncle's, I think, peach farms. Um, there in a Punjabi household, even on your even in the most modern Punjabi household, they may not have vegetables, they will have flowers. And what we do with vegetables, like my fiance's family does with flowers. And they toil the flowers, they grow the flowers, they talk to the flowers. It's such a uh part of who we are as people. But for me, it was looking at my grandma. It was looking at my grandma and the kind of traumas that resurfaced in her eyes. Our elders went through British rule and the stuff that went on there, went through 47 in the partition, and might I add, The partition affected Punjab and Punjabis disproportionately compared to those in the rest of India. It was Punjab that ended up getting divided predominantly. So that, then there was the Taram Yudh Morcha, then which led to, the 84 embombing of the Golden Temple and the Sikh genocide. There is just so much that is deep within her, that trauma that she has worked so hard to kind of suppress and make sure that she doesn't pass on to my dad and then to me. It's almost like she's 88 now, and she only has maximum like 5 to 7 years left in her life. I don't want her to die thinking that the world is the same as she was born into. There,
Mm-hmm.
like that is my burning desire. Like I look at her face and I'm like rejuvenated. Like, no, grandma, you're leaving behind a better world for your grandchildren and great grandchildren. And it becomes personal like that. And I talk about this a lot, that for for all of the children of the diaspora, the reason why we are so vocal is because all of our grandparents have been through the same thing. The conversations in our houses are all the same, you know so that is basically it for me. But I do think that the elderly that are at Delhi's borders, they are gone there with the spirit to die.
Mm-hmm.
That you either take back the farm bills or you kill us. We're not going anywhere. That's literally what they have. Like, we're gonna die anyways, so might as well die here.
No, it's this, few of the people that we know have been arrested or continue to be in jail, and there's just guilt that we face when we get together as activists sometimes, of like being like, you know what do you think? Because do they think that we've forgotten about them? Like, there's also a guilt of like, you're on the outside, you've you're not facing the worst that this state can do to you. And I remember during the Delhi elections that were happening, when I think around Jan last year, there was a BJP representative, I forget the person, but he said something along the lines of BJP will demolish 3,000 or 3,500 mosques if they come into power, when it forms the next government, And I remember being on the protest site, and these two old elderly people, talking to each other, being like, they said they'll demolish the mosques. And they were scared also about, saying that if we don't have paperwork, they'll kick us out. But where do we go? We don't know where to go. And you could see that fear, where they're sitting and talking to each other. And just that, I think it's no person living in a democracy should have that kind of fear that their land will be taken away from them with zero accountability, that they will be kicked out of their own country, put in detention camps, that their religious places of worship will be destroyed because they pray to a God that the majority doesn't. That's not a democracy, and that is not reflective of an Indian democracy. That is not the constitution that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar gifted us with and promised us, and that is something that we as Indians, I just, I'm grateful for you and your fight. And I'm also, I think, to people asking, how do you carry on? How do you do this work? We have to remember that there are people still doing it even when we take a break, because
Yeah.
they are driven by this innate sense of fear of not knowing what will happen to them, their future, their kids, their land, their religion, and they still show up. So the least we can do is to continue to show up. And thank you for having this conversation, and for, I think, showing up in a way that should make them scared, because they're not.
I a lot of the times difficulty comes in finding people to have these types of conversations with, because the understanding of this is very limited to most people. So I'm glad that you agreed to have this conversation with me. Thank you for being here. And thank you for all that you've been doing.
No, thank you, and I'm sending you so much love, and we will keep the fight on.
Absolutely. Bye, love.